In this series of videos, I'm looking at overlanding accessories that I consider to be essential. Now this week's item's a little bit questionable. It definitely depends on where you live. If you're here in Kentucky, it's useful. If you live or travel in the Pacific Northwest, it's probably essential. And that item is a saw, a way of cutting up or removing trees. It's not uncommon to go down a trail and find a bunch of trees or branches laying across in your way. Now, sometimes you can get away with just pulling it. You can either pull it with the vehicle or with a winch, but sometimes you just have to cut it up in order to move it. It's worth taking something with you so you can cut those trees up. One of your options is to take some hand tools. So you can take a normal sized hand saw, you can get those little compact saws. You could even take, I don't know what it's called, but it's like a little chain from a chainsaw. It's got two rings on the end and you can basically run it across the wood and cut it that way. Those things are great for smaller branches that are across the trail, and also they take up very little room inside your vehicle. You could also take an axe. Now that's going to take up a lot more space, so you're going to have to find somewhere to store that, but that's going to give you the advantage of having a way of cutting up firewood later. I'm lazy though. I don't want to pull that effort in, so my tool of choice is a chainsaw, specifically this one. This is the DeWalt 20 volt, 12 inch battery operated chainsaw. And with the 5 amp hour battery that came with it, this thing cost me just over $200, which is about what you'd pay for a low end gas chainsaw. Now you may have noticed that this one's actually brand new, and that's because the one I've been using has been borrowed. I borrowed it last summer when I went traveling for 5 weeks, and I borrowed it to use around the house several times too. I've been so happy with it and I've used it so much that I end up going out and buying my own for this summer's trip. Now you may be wondering, why did I choose battery over gas? And there are several reasons for that. The first of those is that this is typically, or the battery ones are typically more compact than the gas ones. So if I spin this one round, it's actually got an easy way of removing the blade here. So this comes off and I can store it in quite a small case, one of those, maybe the cheap Harbor Freight cases. That's nice for longer trips, especially when space inside your vehicle is limited. The second reason is they're just so much easier to use. These things are pretty much plug and play. I put the battery in, I take the cover off, and it's ready to use. They're also light, so they're easy to handle. These things don't vibrate like crazy, don't make a bunch of noise, and you don't have to really do much maintenance with them. Finally, the biggest reason is I don't have to worry about fuel or fuel mixtures for this chainsaw. If you have a gas chainsaw, you have to mix up the fuel, you have to take those mixtures with you, you have to worry about it leaking inside your vehicle. They're just really smelly, and you don't get that with these battery operated ones. Now, most people who have a gas chainsaw end up keeping it on top of the vehicle or on the back of the vehicle, but then of course it's at risk of being stolen. Not a problem with this. Now, there are obviously downsides with battery-operated chainsaws. One of those is how long they can last. With a gas one, you just refuel it and you can keep going and going and going. I have actually been really impressed with this though. If you're just cutting small branches, things like 2x4s, this thing will go forever. You can take all the branches off a tree. Once you start getting to the really big logs, that's when this thing starts to struggle. If you're chewing through like a 20-inch tree, hardwood tree, you may get 5 or 6 cuts out of this. In taking this with me, I have never run out of battery on the trails. Obviously, I could take the charger with me and charge it up if I had to. It has never been an issue. If you're going to be traveling some trails that maybe haven't been traveled in 3 or 4 years, then you definitely want to go with a gas-powered one. But if you're going one that people have traveled within that season and maybe there's just 1 or 2 trees down because of a storm, then this will easily do the job. If you've been thinking about getting a chainsaw for overland travel, I definitely recommend getting something like this, a nice battery-operated chainsaw. It's just so much easier, so much more convenient, and if you're only using it for overland travel, it will do the job just fine. If you're the kind of person that needs a gas-powered chainsaw, I can guarantee you already own a gas-powered chainsaw. In fact, you probably already own several gas-powered chainsaws. When picking a branded chainsaw, there are plenty of brands you can choose for. I'm not necessarily saying go with DeWalt, I'm just recommending battery-operated chainsaws in general. Everyone has their own preferences. You pick what you want. Ultimately, I chose DeWalt because I already have several DeWalt tools in the 20 volt line, so it made sense. I can use the battery I've got here with those, and I can use those batteries with this. So if you're already invested in another brand of tool, go with that, go with their chainsaw. For this one, if you already have DeWalt tools, you can save quite a lot of money by getting the one without the battery, so you can pick this up for just $150 without the battery or the charger. If you are thinking about going with the DeWalt, there are a couple of things you should probably know before you buy. First of these things is to do with the attachment for the blade here. You add and you remove it using this, basically this little plastic circle here, plastic handle. I like that because it makes it really easy. If you're out in the forest, you don't need any tools to undo this, attach the blade, remove the blade, whatever. However, I do think that this is a point of weakness because it is plastic. When you compare this to the competitors, so things like Ryobi, Milwaukee, Makita, they all use bolts on here, so you have to use a tool to add or remove it. And I'll put links to each of theirs in the description as well, so you can check those out too. On the other side, it's a similar problem with the bar oil here, and unfortunately this is going to be a point of weakness. It's also plastic, and you're going to have to use this quite often. This thing drinks the bar oil. Unfortunately, that means that you're not going to be completely free of these smelly liquids, because you are going to have to take extra bar oil with you. This thing, probably you have to completely refill it every time you change the battery. I'd be interested to hear your experiences, whether or not you've had to use a chainsaw on the trails, whether you've had to turn around because the tree's down. If you've already got a chainsaw, tell me about it, give me some of the pros, and more importantly, tell me the cons. Not a lot of people talk about the bad stuff about their tools. They don't like to. If you found this video useful, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you scroll down to the links, I'll put links to this and several of the competitors as well. If you use those links, it helps me out. Thanks for watching.